The sound of the lock turning in the attic room had become as routine as the rising and setting of the sun for Sophia Ellsworth. But today something was different today. The lock turned at an hour when it never should have. And instead of her mother's stern face or her father's disappointed scowl, a dust-covered stranger with eyes the color of a summer storm appeared in her doorway. Sophia had been confined to the attic room of her family's grand house for exactly 4 months and 18 days. She kept track of the passing time by marking small notches on the wooden floorboard beneath her bed with a hairpin she had managed to hide from her mother. The year was 1878, and Ely, Nevada was beginning to flourish as a mining town after the discovery of copper deposits in the nearby mountains. Her family, the Ellsworths, were among the first to settle in Ely, establishing themselves as prominent figures in the community. Her father, Harold Ellsworth, owned the largest general store in town and had recently expanded his business ventures into mining interests. Her mother, Beatrice, was known throughout the county for her charity work and impeccable social standing. They had a reputation to uphold, which was precisely why Sophia had been locked away. She had committed the unforgivable sin of falling in love with the wrong man, the son of her father's business rival. When she refused to break off the relationship, her parents took drastic measures. They spread rumors that she had contracted a serious illness requiring isolation, and locked her away in the attic room of their grand Victorian home. Only her family knew the truth, and they were determined to keep her confined until she agreed to marry the wealthy banker's son they had chosen for her. The first month of her confinement had been filled with rage. Sophia had screamed, pounded on the door, and threatened to jump from the window, though the 3-story drop had ultimately deterred her. The second month brought despair and tears. By the third month, she had fallen into a numb acceptance, her spirit nearly broken. She wrote in her journal, read the few books her younger sister secretly brought her, and stared out the window at the mountains in the distance, wondering if she would ever feel the sun on her face again. And then came the 4th month, and with it him. Miss Ellsworth. The stranger's voice was low and cautious as he stepped into the room. Dust coated his clothing, and his dark hair was tucked beneath a well-worn cowboy hat. "I'm Zachary Morrison. I don't mean to frighten you." Sophia backed away until her shoulders pressed against the wall. She wore a simple cotton dress that had once been her best day dress, but had become her prison uniform. Her auburn hair hung in a loose braid over her shoulder, and her once rosy complexion had paled from months without sunlight. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice raspy from disuse. "How did you get in here?" Zachary took off his hat, revealing eyes that seemed to shift between gray and blue. "I work for your father, or rather, I did until this morning. I've been helping with the deliveries to the store for the past 2 months." He spoke with a slight accent that suggested he came from somewhere in the southern states. "I've heard the rumors about you being ill, but the housekeeper, Martha, she told me different." Sophia's eyes widened. Martha was the only servant who knew the truth and had shown her kindness, bringing her extra food when her parents weren't watching. "Martha said your parents are keeping you locked up until you agree to marry some banker fellow," Zachary continued, his jaw tightening. "Said they were heading to Carson City today for business and wouldn't be back until tomorrow night. I couldn't just—" He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "Well, I couldn't just let it be." "So you broke into my parents' house?" Sophia asked, finding her voice. Despite her fear, a spark of hope ignited in her chest. "Technically, I used the key Martha gave me," he said with a slight smile. "I don't make a habit of breaking into houses, Miss Ellsworth. You could be arrested," she whispered. "Probably," he agreed, his expression serious. "But that doesn't seem right important compared to what's being done to you. No one should be locked up against their will. Sophia stared at him, her mind racing. This man, this stranger, was offering her freedom. But where would she go? What would she do? Her parents had made it clear they would rather see her locked away than allow her to disgrace the family name. "I can't leave," she said finally. "My father would find me. He has connections throughout Nevada." Zachary took a step closer, careful to move slowly so as not to frighten her. "I'm heading to California, San Francisco. I've got a cousin there who's starting a business. He needs help and I need a fresh start." He hesitated. "You could come with me. Your family wouldn't find you there." "With you?" Sophia's voice rose in disbelief. "I don't even know you." "I know how it sounds," he said, "but I'm offering you safe passage, nothing more. Once we reach San Francisco, you can go your own way if you choose. His voice softened. "I just couldn't stand knowing you were up here, locked away like this." Sophia studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. All she saw was earnestness and a quiet determination. "Why would you risk this for me?" she asked. Zachary's expression grew distant. "My sister was forced to marry a man she hated. It destroyed her. She took her own life last year." His eyes refocused on Sophia. "I couldn't save her. Maybe I can help you." His words hung in the air between them. Sophia felt a lump form in her throat as she considered her options. Stay and eventually submit to her parents' demands, or risk everything on the word of this stranger. "If I go with you," she said slowly, "I need your word that you'll respect my wishes, that I'll be free to make my own choices once we reach California." "You have my word," Zachary said without hesitation. "I'm offering escape, not another cage." Sophia took a deep breath. "How soon can we leave?" A slow smile spread across Zachary's face. "Right now, if you're willing. I've got a wagon waiting behind the house. We can be out of town before anyone knows you're gone." Sophia moved to the small dresser and pulled out the few possessions she couldn't bear to leave behind: her journal, a locket containing a portrait of her grandmother, and a small pouch of coins she had saved over the years. She quickly stuffed them into a pillowcase. "I don't have proper traveling clothes," she said, suddenly aware of how unprepared she was for the journey ahead. "We can stop at a trading post once we're a safe distance away," Zachary assured her. "For now, we need to move quickly." Sophia nodded, her heart pounding as the reality of what she was about to do sank in. She was leaving everything she had ever known: her family, her home, her life in Ely. But as she looked around the small attic room that had become her prison, she knew there was no real choice to make. "I'm ready," she said, clutching her makeshift bag. Zachary nodded and moved toward the door, peering out to ensure the hallway was clear. "Stay close," he whispered. Together, they made their way down the narrow attic stairs and through the silent house. Sophia felt dizzy with each step, unaccustomed to movement after months of confinement. When they reached the back door, Zachary offered his arm for support. "It's not far to the wagon," he said softly. The moment Sophia stepped outside, the late afternoon sunlight nearly blinded her. She gasped, both from the brightness and from the sensation of fresh air filling her lungs. The mountains she had only viewed through her window now stretched before her in their full majesty, and the scent of pine trees and dust filled her senses. "Are you all right?" Zachary asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Sophia nodded, unable to speak as tears filled her eyes. Freedom, after so long, felt overwhelming. Zachary led her to a wagon partially hidden behind a stand of trees. 2 sturdy horses were hitched to it, and supplies were stacked in the back beneath a canvas cover. "It's not the most comfortable ride," he apologized, helping her climb onto the wooden seat, "but it'll get us where we need to go." As Sophia settled herself, she caught sight of her family's house, the grand Victorian structure that had been both home and prison. For a brief moment, doubt crept into her mind. Was she making a terrible mistake? Then she remembered the sound of the lock turning each morning and night, the way her father had dismissed her feelings as foolish feminine fancies, how her mother had told her that in time she would thank them for saving her from ruin. "Let's go," she said firmly. Zachary climbed up beside her, took the reins, and with a gentle command to the horses, they began to move. Instead of taking the main road through town, he guided the wagon along a less traveled path that skirted the edge of Ely. "We'll join up with the main westward trail once we're past Headley's Creek," he explained. "By then, we'll be far enough that no one will connect us with your disappearance right away." Sophia nodded, keeping her head down as they passed farms on the outskirts of town. She had known many of these families her entire life, but now she feared recognition more than anything. "Martha packed some food for the first leg of our journey," Zachary said, attempting to ease the tension. "She seemed mighty pleased to be part of your escape." "Martha was kind to me," Sophia said softly. "She has a daughter my age who eloped with a minor last year. Her husband disowned the girl, but Martha would sneak letters to her. I think she saw something similar in my situation." They continued in silence for a while, the only sounds the creaking of the wagon wheels and the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves on the dusty trail. As the sun began to set, painting the Nevada sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Ely disappeared behind them. "We should make camp soon," Zachary said as twilight descended. "There's a good spot near the creek about a mile ahead." Sophia nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she felt. The excitement and fear of escape, combined with more physical activity than she had experienced in months, left her drained. When they reached the creek, Zachary helped her down from the wagon. Her legs trembled beneath her, and he caught her arm to steady her. "Easy now," he said, his voice gentle. "You've been through quite a day." "I'm fine," she insisted, though she was grateful for his support, "just unused to so much movement." Zachary efficiently set up a small camp. He built a fire in a ring of stones that suggested other travelers had used this spot before. From the wagon, he produced blankets, cooking utensils, and the food Martha had packed. "It's not much," he said apologetically, as he handed Sophia a plate of cold biscuits and dried beef, "but we'll have a proper meal tomorrow." Sophia accepted the food gratefully. After months of her mother's restrictive diet designed, Beatrice had claimed, to curb Sophia's willful nature, even simple trail food tasted like a feast. As they ate, Zachary kept a respectful distance, sitting on the other side of the fire. The flickering flames illuminated his features, and Sophia studied him more carefully now that the initial shock of her escape had worn off. He was younger than she had first thought, probably no more than 25 or 26, with a lean build hardened by physical labor. His face was tanned from working outdoors, with fine lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though his expression remained serious now. "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Morrison," Sophia said, breaking the silence. "If we're to travel together, I should know something about you." Zachary looked up, seemingly surprised by her interest. "Not much to tell, really. I was born in Georgia, but my family moved west after the war. My father tried his hand at ranching in Texas, but it didn't work out. After he passed, my mother's sister and I moved to Colorado. That's where." He paused. "That's where my sister married. After she died, my mother went to live with her brother in Oregon, and I've been working my way west ever since." "And now you're heading to San Francisco," Sophia prompted. "Yes, madam. My cousin Thomas has a shipping business. Started small, but he's doing well now and offered me a position." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I've spent enough years drifting. Time to put down some roots. Sophia nodded, understanding the appeal of stability. What made you stop in Ely? The horses needed rest, and your father was hiring. Seemed like a good place to earn some money before the final stretch to California. He looked at her across the fire. What about you, Miss Ellsworth? What's your story? Sophia sighed, setting aside her empty plate. My story is much less interesting. I've lived in Ely my entire life. My father moved the family there when I was just a baby, convinced the town would grow into something important. He was right about that, at least. And the man they wanted you to marry? Zachary asked carefully. Frederick Holden, son of the banker in Carson City. Sophia's voice grew bitter. I met him exactly twice. He's nearly 40 years old and has buried 2 wives already, but he's wealthy, and an alliance with his family would have secured my father's mining investments. And the man you chose instead? His question was gentle, without judgment. Sophia's eyes dropped to her hands. Daniel Cooper. His father owns the competing general store in town. Our families have been rivals for years, but Daniel and I. She smiled sadly. We grew up together before the rivalry turned bitter. Last spring, we began meeting in secret. He wanted to marry me, take me to Denver where he has family. When my father found out, he was furious. So he locked you away, Zachary said, his voice hardening. Yes. At first, they said it was temporary just until I came to my senses. Then weeks turned into months. Sophia looked up at the star-filled sky, relishing the openness after so long in confinement. Daniel tried to see me at first. He came to the house, demanded to speak with me. My father had him beaten by the sheriff's deputies on charges of trespassing. That's. Zachary seemed to struggle for words. After that, there were no more visits, Sophia continued. I don't know if he gave up or if something happened to him. My family wouldn't tell me anything, and eventually I stopped asking. They fell into silence again, each lost in their own thoughts as the fire burned low. Finally, Zachary stood and added more wood to the flames. You should rest, he said. I've set up a bedroll for you in the wagon. It'll be more comfortable than the ground. Thank you, Sophia said, suddenly aware of how tired she truly was. What about you? I'll keep watch for a while, he replied. Old habit from traveling alone. Sophia nodded and made her way to the wagon. The bedroll was simple but clean, and after months of sleeping on a narrow cot, it felt luxurious. As she settled beneath the blanket, she could see Zachary's silhouette by the fire, his back straight as he gazed out into the darkness. Despite her exhaustion, sleep did not come easily. Her mind raced with thoughts of what she had done. By morning, her absence would be discovered. By afternoon, her father would likely have a search party looking for her. If they were caught, Zachary would face prison, and she would be returned to her attic prison or worse, immediately forced into marriage with Frederick Holden. Yet beneath the fear was a current of exhilaration. For the first time in her adult life, Sophia had made a choice entirely her own, consequences be damned. Whatever happened next, this moment of freedom was worth any price she might have to pay. With that thought, she finally drifted off to sleep under the vast Nevada sky. Dawn broke with a gentle golden light that filtered through the canvas covering of the wagon. For a moment, Sophia was disoriented, accustomed to waking in her attic room. Then the events of the previous day rushed back, and she sat up quickly. Zachary was already awake, tending to a small fire where a pot of coffee brewed. He looked up as she climbed down from the wagon, his face tired but alert. Morning, he said. Hope you slept well. Better than I have in months, Sophia admitted, smoothing down her rumpled dress. Though I fear I look quite a fright. There's a spot behind those trees where you can wash up, Zachary said, gesturing to a cluster of cottonwoods near the creek. I'll have coffee ready when you return. Grateful for his consideration, Sophia took a small cloth he offered and made her way to the creek. The water was cold but refreshing as she washed her face and hands. She unbraided her hair, combed it with her fingers as best she could, and rebraided it neatly. It wasn't much, but it made her feel more human. When she returned to camp, Zachary handed her a tin cup of black coffee and a piece of hardtack. "Not much of a breakfast," he apologized, "but we'll reach Milford by midday. We can get proper supplies there." Sophia accepted the meager meal gratefully. "You didn't sleep," she observed, noting the shadows beneath his eyes. Zachary shrugged. "I dozed some. I'll rest better tonight when we're further from Ely." They packed up the camp quickly, and soon they were on the trail again. The morning was pleasant, with a cool breeze that carried the scent of sage and pine. Sophia found herself noticing small details of the landscape that she had never appreciated before: the way the sunlight caught on a distant stream, the flash of a red-tailed hawk against the blue sky, the varied textures of the rock formations they passed. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Zachary glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Nevada has its charms, different from Georgia's green hills or California's coastline, but beautiful in its own right." "You've seen the ocean?" Sophia asked, curiosity piqued. "Once, when I was a boy. My father took us to Savannah before the war." His expression grew distant with memory. "I've never forgotten the sight of it. Endless water stretching to the horizon makes a man feel small." "I hope to see it someday," Sophia said, surprised by her own certainty. A week ago, she would never have imagined herself having a future beyond Ely, let alone dreams of seeing the ocean. "You will," Zachary assured her. "San Francisco sits right on the bay. The ships come in from all over the world." As promised, they reached the small settlement of Milford shortly after midday. It was little more than a trading post, a saloon and a few scattered houses, but to Sophia, it represented their first test. If news of her disappearance had spread quickly, they might face questions here. "Stay in the wagon," Zachary instructed as they approached the trading post. "Keep your head down. I'll get what we need and be back quickly." Sophia nodded, pulling a blanket around her shoulders despite the warm day. She watched anxiously as Zachary entered the trading post, her heart racing each time another customer came or went. After what seemed an eternity, he emerged with a burlap sack full of supplies. His expression was calm as he loaded the goods into the wagon. "Everything all right?" she whispered as he climbed back onto the seat beside her. "Just fine," he said, though his voice was tight. "But we should move on, quickly." He urged the horses into a trot, and they left Milford behind with more haste than they had approached it. Once they were back on the open trail, Sophia turned to him. "What happened in there?" she demanded. Zachary's jaw was set in a grim line. "There was talk about a missing woman from Ely. Your father's offering a reward for information, quite a substantial one." Sophia's blood ran cold. "Did anyone recognize me?" "No, but they're looking for a woman traveling alone or with a man matching my description." He glanced at her. "I told the shopkeeper I was heading north to the mining camps with my wife." "Your wife?" Sophia repeated, her cheeks flushing. "It was the first thing that came to mind," Zachary said apologetically. "A married couple draws less attention than a single man and woman traveling together. I bought you some clothes, a dress, some practical things, and a wedding band." He handed her a simple gold ring, "just for appearances." Sophia stared at the ring. It represented yet another deception, yet another identity to assume, but she understood the necessity of it. "It's a good plan," she admitted, slipping the ring onto her finger. It was slightly too large but would serve its purpose. "What name did you give for your wife?" "Sarah," he said. "Sarah Morrison. close enough to Sophia that you'll respond naturally if someone addresses you. They traveled for several more hours, pushing the horses harder than Zachary would have liked. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, promising rain. "There's an abandoned line cabin about 2 miles ahead," Zachary said, eyeing the sky. "Used to belong to the Pony Express before the telegraph put them out of business. We can shelter there for the night." The first drops of rain began to fall as they reached the cabin. It was small but sturdy, with a stone fireplace and a roof that appeared mostly intact. Zachary quickly unhitched the horses and led them to a lean-to attached to the side of the cabin, while Sophia carried their supplies inside. The interior was dusty but dry. A rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed frame with a straw-filled mattress constituted the only furniture. Sophia set about sweeping the floor with a broom she found in the corner while Zachary brought in firewood that had been stacked outside. "It's not much," he said as he knelt to build a fire, "but it'll keep us dry." "It's perfect," Sophia replied, and she meant it. After her confinement, the simple cabin with its single window and open door felt spacious and welcoming. As the rain intensified, drumming on the roof, Zachary prepared a more substantial meal than they had enjoyed the previous night: beans, salt pork, and biscuits cooked in a cast iron pan over the fire. Sophia changed into one of the dresses he had purchased, a simple blue calico that was a welcome replacement for her soiled and wrinkled garment. They ate in companionable silence, listening to the storm outside. After they finished, Zachary produced a small package from his coat pocket. "I got something else at the trading post," he said, handing it to Sophia. "Thought you might like it." She unwrapped the package to find a small leather-bound book, a collection of poems by Emily Dickinson. "How did you know?" she asked, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Zachary looked slightly embarrassed. "Martha mentioned you liked to read, said poetry was your favorite. It was the only book they had that wasn't a Bible or a dime novel." Sophia ran her fingers over the embossed cover. "Thank you. This means more than you know." The storm continued through the night, but inside the cabin, Sophia felt safer than she had in months. Zachary insisted on sleeping on the floor near the fire, giving her the bed. Despite her protests that they could take turns, he was firm on the matter. "Rest easy, Miss Ellsworth," he said. "We have a long journey ahead of us." Sophia settled onto the simple bed, the poetry book clutched to her chest. "You've done so much for me," she said softly. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Zachary was quiet for a long moment. "There's nothing to repay," he finally said. "Some things a person does because they are right, not because they expect something in return." With those words hanging in the air between them, Sophia closed her eyes and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The storm had passed by morning, leaving behind a washed, clean world that sparkled in the early sunlight. They left the cabin at dawn, eager to put more distance between themselves and Ely. The trail was muddy but passable, and they made good progress throughout the morning. As they traveled, Sophia found herself watching Zachary the way he handled the horses with quiet confidence, how his eyes constantly scanned the horizon, the gentle care he took to ensure her comfort. He was unlike any man she had known in Ely, where men like her father measured their worth in property and business success, and younger men like Daniel Cooper chafed under their father's control, eager to prove themselves through bold actions and grand promises. Zachary seemed to have no need to impress anyone. He simply did what needed doing with a competence that spoke of years of self-reliance. It was oddly compelling. "Tell me about San Francisco," she said as they stopped to rest the horses at midday. "What's it like?" Zachary considered the question as he refilled their canteens from a clear stream. "I've only been once, briefly. It's a city of contrasts, grand mansions on Nob Hill and crowded tenements by the docks, ships from China and Europe and everywhere in between. Every language you can imagine spoken on the streets. He handed her a canteen. But what I remember most is the fog. Rolls in from the bay each evening, turns the whole city into something from a dream. It sounds wonderful, Sophia said, trying to picture it. It can be, Zachary agreed. It can also be harsh for those without means, but there are opportunities there that don't exist in places like Ely. Women can make their own way if they've got determination. And do I seem determined to you, Mr. Morrison? Sophia asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. He looked at her then, really looked at her, his gray-blue eyes serious. Yes, Miss Ellsworth, I believe you do. Something in his gaze made her heart beat a little faster, and she quickly looked away, busying herself with repacking their lunch supplies. The next few days fell into a rhythm. They traveled from dawn until dusk, stopping at small settlements only when necessary for supplies. Each night they made camp by a stream or sheltered in an abandoned cabin when they could find one. Zachary taught Sophia practical skills she had never learned: how to build a fire, how to tell direction by the stars, how to identify which plants were safe to eat. In turn, Sophia shared stories from the books she had read during her confinement, recited poetry from memory, and told Zachary about her dreams of someday becoming a teacher, a path her parents had discouraged in favor of making an advantageous marriage. "You'd make a fine teacher," he said one evening as they sat by the fire. "You've got a way of explaining things that makes them clear." "Perhaps in San Francisco," she said, allowing herself to imagine such a future for the first time. "Perhaps," he agreed, though something in his tone had shifted, become more reserved. Sophia noticed the change but didn't comment on it. As the days passed and they drew closer to California, she found herself increasingly troubled by thoughts of their impending separation. Zachary had been true to his word, treating her with unwavering respect and asking nothing of her but her company on the journey. Yet she couldn't deny that something had grown between them, a comfortable companionship that had begun to feel like something more. On the 7th day of their journey, they crossed into California. The landscape began to change, the arid Nevada terrain giving way to more varied vegetation as they approached the Sierra Nevada mountains. "We'll need to cross the mountains before the first snow," Zachary explained as they made camp that night. "Once we're on the other side, it's less than a week to San Francisco." Sophia nodded, trying to ignore the pang she felt at the thought of their journey ending soon. "Have you written to your cousin? Will he be expecting me?" "I sent a letter from the last settlement we passed through," Zachary confirmed. "Thomas is a good man. He'll help you get settled until you find your feet." "That's very kind of him," Sophia said quietly. Zachary was silent for a moment, poking at the fire with a stick. "About that," he finally said, his voice carefully neutral, "I've been thinking about your situation. When we reach San Francisco, you'll need references for employment, especially if you hope to teach. I could." He cleared his throat. "I could provide a letter stating you worked as a governess for my family. It might help." Sophia stared at him, touched by his thoughtfulness yet again. "You would do that for me, of course," he said simply. "I want you to succeed, Miss Ellsworth." "Sophia," she corrected him. "After all we've been through, I think you can call me Sophia." A small smile curved his lips. "Sophia, then." The way he said her name sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening chill. Their path through the Sierra Nevada was arduous but breathtaking. The mountains rose around them, majestic and imposing, the forests dense with pine trees that reached toward the sky. The air grew cooler as they climbed higher, and the nights became cold enough that they needed to sleep closer to the fire. On the third night in the mountains, they found shelter in an abandoned mining cabin perched on a ridge overlooking a vast valley. As they prepared their evening meal, Zachary seemed unusually quiet. "Is something troubling you?" Sophia finally asked. He hesitated, then nodded toward the western horizon. "Weather's changing. Those clouds mean snow. We need to cross the summit tomorrow, or we risk getting caught in a storm." Sophia followed his gaze to the dark clouds gathering in the distance. "How bad could it be?" "Bad enough," he said grimly. The Donner Party wasn't the first group to meet tragedy in these mountains, and they weren't the last. Early snow can trap travelers for weeks. "What can we do?" she asked, trying to keep the worry from her voice. "Leave at first light. Push hard. There's a way station on the western slope where we can take shelter if the weather turns." He looked at her, concern evident in his eyes. "It won't be an easy day." "I can manage," Sophia assured him, squaring her shoulders. Zachary studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I know you can." They rose before dawn the next morning, packing quickly in the dim light. The air had a sharp bite to it, and their breath fogged in front of them. By the time the sun crested the eastern mountains, they were already well on their way toward the summit. The trail grew steeper and narrower as they climbed. In places, Zachary had to lead the horses carefully around sharp bends where the path clung to the mountainside. Sophia walked beside him during these sections, her legs aching with the effort but her spirit determined. By midday, they had reached the summit pass. Below them stretched a panoramic vista of mountains and valleys, a breathtaking sight that momentarily made Sophia forget her fatigue. "It's magnificent," she breathed. Zachary nodded, but his attention was on the western sky, where the clouds had grown darker and more threatening. "We should keep moving. The descent is tricky in places." They had just started down the western slope when the first snowflakes began to fall, large, wet flakes that quickly accumulated on the ground. Within an hour, the gentle snowfall had intensified into a driving storm that reduced visibility to mere feet in front of them. "Stay close," Zachary called over the rising wind. He had dismounted and was leading the horses, his free hand firmly gripping Sophia's arm to ensure she didn't stray from the path. The snow soon covered the trail, making each step treacherous. Sophia's feet were numb with cold despite her sturdy boots, and her face stung from the icy pellets that the wind drove against her skin. Still, she pressed on, drawing strength from Zachary's steady presence beside her. They had been fighting their way through the storm for what felt like hours when disaster struck. As they rounded a bend in the trail, the lead horse slipped on an icy patch. The animal whinnied in panic, its hooves scrambling for purchase on the slick ground. The wagon lurched sideways, teetering dangerously close to the edge of the path. "Get back," Zachary shouted, pushing Sophia away from the wagon. He lunged for the horse's bridle, trying to calm the frightened animal, but it was too late. With a sickening crack, one of the wagon wheels broke through the edge of the trail. The entire wagon began to tip, pulling the horses with it. In a split-second decision, Zachary cut the harnesses with his knife, freeing the horses. The wagon crashed down the steep slope, taking their supplies with it but sparing the animals for a moment. They all stood frozen, Zachary, Sophia, and the two frightened horses. Then Zachary sprang into action. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice grim. "The way station can't be more than a mile or two ahead." "Our supplies," Sophia said weakly, peering through the swirling snow to where the wagon had disappeared down the ravine. "We'll manage," Zachary said. He quickly fashioned makeshift reins for the horses and helped Sophia mount one of them. "Stay on the trail. I'll lead us." The next hour was the most harrowing of Sophia's life. The storm intensified, turning the world into a white void. The cold seeped through her clothing, numbing her limbs until she could barely hold onto the horse's mane. Only Zachary's voice, calling encouragement through the howling wind, kept her moving forward. Just when she thought she couldn't endure another minute, a dark shape loomed ahead, a sturdy log structure partially buried in snowdrifts. "The way station," Zachary shouted. "We made it." They stumbled the final distance to the building. Zachary forced the door open against the drifting snow and helped Sophia inside. The interior was basic, but offered blessed shelter from the storm, a large room with a stone fireplace, several bunks built into the walls, and a small table with benches. "Get those wet clothes off," Zachary ordered as he returned from securing the horses in a small attached stable. "I'll start a fire." Normally, Sophia would have been mortified by such a suggestion, but she was too cold to protest. While Zachary busied himself with the fireplace, she peeled off her sodden outer garments, grateful for the dry shift and spare dress in her saddlebag that had been spared from the wagon's demise. Soon, a fire blazed in the hearth, casting welcome warmth throughout the cabin. Zachary had also changed into dry clothing, though he had fewer spare garments than Sophia. His hair was damp, curling slightly as it dried, and his face was reddened from the cold. "You're bleeding," Sophia suddenly noticed, seeing a dark stain spreading on the sleeve of his shirt. Zachary glanced at his arm with mild surprise. Must have caught it on something when the wagon went over. Without waiting for permission, Sophia moved to his side and carefully rolled up his sleeve. A jagged cut ran along his forearm, not deep but long enough to be concerning. "This needs tending," she said firmly. She found her small sewing kit in her saddlebag and set water to boil in a pot she discovered on a shelf. Zachary sat quietly as she cleaned the wound with a cloth dampened in the hot water. His only reaction was a slight tightening around his eyes when she began stitching the deeper part of the cut with neat, small sutures. "You've done this before," he observed. "My mother insisted I learn basic medical care," Sophia explained. "She said it was a wife's duty to tend to household injuries." "Your mother taught you many useful skills despite her other failings," Zachary said. Sophia's hands stilled for a moment. "Yes, I suppose she did." She finished the final stitch and tied it off neatly. "There. Keep it clean and it should heal well." "Thank you," Zachary said, his eyes meeting hers. They were sitting close, closer than propriety would normally allow. Sophia suddenly became acutely aware of his proximity, the scent of pine and leather that clung to him, the flecks of darker blue in his gray eyes, the slight roughness of stubble on his jaw. Something shifted in the air between them, a tension that had been building gradually throughout their journey. For a brief, breathless moment, Sophia thought he might lean forward, close the small distance between them. Instead, Zachary cleared his throat and moved away, standing to check the windows where snow continued to pile up against the glass. "Storm's not letting up," he said, his voice slightly rougher than normal. "We might be here for a day or two." Sophia busied herself with preparing a simple meal from the provisions in her saddlebag, and the dried meat and beans stored at the way station for exactly such emergencies. They ate in relative silence, both lost in their own thoughts. As night fell, the wind howled around the cabin, finding every crack and crevice to whistle through. Despite the fire's warmth, the temperature in the cabin dropped. Zachary added more wood to the flames and brought in additional blankets from a storage chest. "You should take the bunk nearest the fire," he said, arranging the blankets on one of the built-in beds. "It will be the warmest." Sophia hesitated. "And where will you sleep?" "There are other bunks," he said, gesturing to the far side of the cabin. "Don't be ridiculous," Sophia said with sudden decisiveness. "It's freezing over there. We'll share the blankets by the fire." Zachary's eyes widened. Miss Ellsworth, Sophia, that wouldn't be proper. Sophia almost laughed at the concern for propriety after all they had been through together. I think we're well past proper, Mr. Morrison. Besides, it's a matter of practical survival, nothing more. After a moment's hesitation, Zachary nodded. They arranged the blankets on the floor near the hearth, creating a makeshift bed large enough for both of them. They lay down fully clothed, back to back with a blanket between them as a token concession to propriety. Despite her exhaustion, Sophia found sleep elusive. She was acutely aware of Zachary's presence behind her, the sound of his breathing, the warmth of his body. After everything they had endured, after the trust that had grown between them, she found herself wondering what would happen when they reached San Francisco. Would they simply go their separate ways as planned? The thought filled her with unexpected sadness. Zachary. She whispered, unsure if he was still awake. Yes. His voice was low in the darkness. Thank you for everything, for rescuing me, for protecting me on this journey. She paused, gathering her courage. I don't know what I would have done without you. For a long moment he was silent. Then slowly he turned over to face her back. You would have found a way, Sophia Ellsworth. You're stronger than you know. She turned then, shifting to face him. In the firelight his features were softened, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. Perhaps, she conceded. But I'm glad it was you who found me. Their gazes held, and the air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken feelings. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Zachary reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek, warm and calloused. Sophia, he murmured, her name a question and a plea all at once. In answer, she closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened as months of isolation and weeks of growing attraction culminated in this moment. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer, and she marveled at how right it felt to be held by him. When they finally parted, both breathless, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. I never intended this, he said softly. When I helped you escape, I meant only to give you freedom, not to bind you to me in any way. I know, she whispered. That's why I trust you, that's why. She hesitated, then found her courage. That's why I'm falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. For a heart-stopping moment, Zachary was silent, and Sophia feared she had misread everything. Then he smiled, a full, unguarded smile that transformed his face. I've been fighting my feelings for you since that first night on the trail, he admitted. You deserved your freedom, not another man making claims on you. Is that what you think this is? Sophia asked, her hand coming up to rest against his cheek. Zachary, you gave me my freedom. And now I'm choosing freely to share it with you. He kissed her again, more deeply this time, his hands tangled in her hair. When they separated, his expression had grown serious. If we do this, if we choose each other, you should know what you're getting. I'm not a wealthy man. The position with my cousin is solid, but it's not the life you were raised for. Sophia laughed softly. The life I was raised for included being locked in an attic and forced to marry a man 3 times my age. I think I prefer your offer. Zachary smiled again, but his eyes remained serious. I want to do this right, Sophia. When we reach San Francisco, I want to court you properly. Give you time to be sure, to experience the city and the opportunities it offers before you decide. Sophia was touched by his consideration, his unwillingness to take advantage of their unusual circumstances. I would like that, she agreed, though I think I already know my heart. They fell asleep in each other's arms, the storm raging outside while they remained safe and warm within the cabin's sturdy walls. The blizzard kept them confined to the way station for 3 days. During that time, their relationship deepened as they shared stories of their childhoods, their hopes for the future, and their fears. Zachary spoke of his guilt over his sister's fate and his determination to never allow another woman to be forced into an unwanted marriage. Sophia confided her doubts about her ability to make her way in a city as vast and complex as San Francisco after a lifetime in Ely. "You'll adapt," Zachary assured her. "I've seen how quickly you learn, how resilient you are." On the morning of the fourth day, they awoke to sunshine streaming through the windows. The storm had passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape, pristine white snowdrifts that sparkled in the sunlight. "We should be able to reach Auburn by nightfall," Zachary said as they prepared to leave. "From there, it's an easy journey to Sacramento and then San Francisco." They salvaged what they could from the way station: extra provisions, a small axe, and a map of the western trails. With the wagon gone, they would both ride the horses, carrying their belongings in saddlebags. As they set out, Sophia was struck by the beauty of the snow-covered mountains. The trail was difficult to navigate in places where drifts had formed, but the clear sky and warming sun made the journey less arduous than their desperate dash to the way station had been. They reached Auburn as dusk was falling, a busy mining town that seemed chaotic and overwhelming to Sophia after so many days in the wilderness. Zachary secured them rooms at a respectable inn, insisting on separate accommodations despite their intimacy at the way station. "Your reputation matters," he explained quietly as they stood in the inn's lobby, "especially if you hope to become a teacher." Sophia understood his reasoning, though a part of her missed the closeness they had shared during the storm. That night, she slept fitfully in her comfortable bed, finding it strange to be alone in a room after so many nights with Zachary nearby. The next day, they sold the horses and purchased passage on a riverboat to Sacramento. The boat was crowded with miners, merchants, and families, all heading toward the promise of California's growing cities. Sophia drew curious glances in her trail-worn clothing, but Zachary stayed close to her side, his protective presence warding off unwelcome attention. Sacramento was even larger and more bustling than Auburn, with brick buildings lining wide streets and steamships docked along the river. They stayed only one night before boarding another boat that would take them through the bay to San Francisco. As they stood on the deck of the vessel, watching Sacramento recede behind them, Zachary took Sophia's hand in his. "Nervous?" he asked softly. "A little," she admitted. "Everything is happening so quickly." "We can slow down once we reach the city," he assured her. "Take time to get settled, to be sure of what we want." Sophia squeezed his hand. "I am sure of what I want, Zachary. I'm just not sure how to achieve it in a place I know nothing about." "One step at a time," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "That's how we got here from Ely, and that's how we'll build our future." Our future. The words sent a warmth through Sophia that had nothing to do with the California sunshine. After months of confinement and uncertainty, the idea of a future of her own choosing, with a man who respected her strength and independence, seemed like a miracle. The journey through the bay was unlike anything Sophia had experienced. The vast expanse of water, the islands rising from the mist, and finally, the city itself, San Francisco, spread across its famous hills, ships crowding its harbor, buildings climbing the slopes in a testament to human determination. "It's just as you described," Sophia breathed as they approached the docks. "Like something from a dream." Zachary smiled, his eyes reflecting her wonder. "Wait until you see it up close." Thomas Morrison met them at the pier, a tall man with the same gray-blue eyes as his cousin, but with a merchant's polished appearance rather than a traveler's ruggedness. He greeted Zachary warmly and welcomed Sophia with respectful curiosity. "My cousin's letter explained some of your circumstances, Miss Ellsworth," Thomas said as they rode in his carriage toward Nob Hill, where he maintained a comfortable home. "Please know that you are welcome to stay with my family for as long as you need." "Thank you, Mr. Morrison," Sophia replied, touched by his kindness to a stranger. "I hope not to impose for long." "Nonsense," Thomas said with a smile. "My wife, Eleanor, is delighted to have another woman in the house. She finds my conversation about shipping routes and cargo manifests rather dull." The Morrison home was elegant without being ostentatious, a 3-story residence with bay windows overlooking the city and a small garden in the back. Eleanor Morrison proved to be as welcoming as her husband, immediately taking Sophia under her wing. "You poor dear," she said when they were alone in the guest bedroom that would be Sophia's. "What a terrible ordeal you've been through, and then that dreadful journey across the mountains. You must be exhausted." "It wasn't all terrible," Sophia said, her thoughts turning to Zachary and the connection that had grown between them. Eleanor's eyes twinkled knowingly. "Yes, I rather gathered that from the way you look at my husband's cousin. Zachary is a good man, the best of men, really. Thomas has been trying to convince him to settle in San Francisco for years." Sophia felt her cheeks warm. "He's been very kind to me. More than kind, I suspect," Eleanor said with a gentle smile. "But we'll have plenty of time to talk about that. For now, you should rest. Tomorrow, we'll see about getting you some proper clothes and discussing your plans." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Zachary courted Sophia, properly escorting her to the theater, taking her on walks through the city's parks, introducing her to the cultural attractions San Francisco had to offer. Eleanor helped Sophia acquire a suitable wardrobe and introduced her to the city's social circles, carefully presenting her as a distant relative who had come to California for her health. Thomas, true to his promise to Zachary, offered Sophia a position as a clerk in the office of his shipping company. The work was interesting and gave her a sense of independence she had never known in Ely. More importantly, it allowed her to save money toward her goal of eventually becoming a teacher. "The city is establishing more schools every year," Eleanor told her one evening as they sat in the parlor after dinner. "With your education and refinement, you would make an excellent teacher for young ladies." "That's my hope," Sophia admitted, "though I'm finding I enjoy the shipping business more than I expected." "Thomas says you have quite a head for figures," Eleanor said approvingly. "He's impressed with your work." Zachary, who had been listening from his seat by the fire, smiled. "I told you she was remarkable," he said to his cousin's wife. His words, spoken with such simple pride, warmed Sophia more than any elaborate compliment could have. As the weeks turned into months, Sophia found herself truly flourishing in San Francisco. She made friends among the other young women who worked as clerks and shop assistants. She attended lectures at the Mechanics Institute Library and took drawing lessons at a local studio. She even wrote to her younger sister in Ely, sending the letter through Martha to avoid her parents discovering her whereabouts. And through it all, her relationship with Zachary deepened and matured. They learned each other's habits, preferences, and flaws. They had occasional disagreements. Zachary could be overly protective, and Sophia sometimes struggled to express her needs directly after years of having her opinions dismissed. But they always found their way back to understanding, their communication growing stronger with each resolved conflict. 6 months after their arrival in San Francisco, Zachary took Sophia on a picnic to a bluff overlooking the bay. The spring day was unusually clear, with no fog to obscure the spectacular view of the water and the distant hills. "I have something for you," Zachary said as they finished their meal. From his pocket, he produced a small box. Sophia's heart quickened as she accepted it. Inside was a ring, not an elaborate diamond like the ones displayed in the city's fine jewelry shops, but a delicate band of gold set with a small pearl. "It was my mother's," Zachary explained. "She gave it to me before she went to Oregon, said I should give it to the woman I chose to share my life with." He took her hand, his expression more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. "Sophia Ellsworth, these past months have been the happiest of my life. You are the strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever known. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Sophia's eyes as she looked at the man before her, the man who had broken her lock and carried her to freedom, who had respected her choices and supported her dreams, who had shown her what true partnership could be. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "Yes, Zachary Morrison, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and this time it fit perfectly, as if it had always been meant for her hand. When he kissed her, it felt like a promise not of possession or control, but of shared dreams and mutual respect. They were married in the garden of Thomas and Eleanor's home on a sunny afternoon in June, 1879. The ceremony was small but joyful, attended by the friends they had made in San Francisco. To Sophia's surprise and delight, her sister Catherine had defied their parents to travel to California for the wedding, bringing with her a letter from Martha expressing her joy at Sophia's happiness. "Father is still furious," Catherine confided the night before the wedding as the sisters stayed up late talking in Sophia's room. "But Mother has begun to regret what they did. She keeps your room just as it was, as though expecting you to return someday." "I won't go back," Sophia said firmly. "Not to stay, but perhaps someday we can visit when the wounds aren't so fresh," Catherine nodded, understanding. "And Daniel Cooper," she asked hesitantly. "Do you ever wonder what became of him?" Sophia considered the question. In the early days of her journey with Zachary, thoughts of Daniel had still lingered in her mind. But those memories had faded, replaced by the reality of the man who had truly fought for her freedom. "I hope he's well," she said honestly. "But my heart belongs to Zachary now completely." After the wedding, Zachary and Sophia moved into a modest house near the bay. Zachary continued working for his cousin, gradually taking on more responsibility in the shipping business. Sophia divided her time between working as a clerk and volunteering at a school for young girls in a working-class neighborhood, gaining the experience she would need to eventually become a teacher. Their life together was not without challenges. News came that Sophia's father had hired Pinkerton detectives to search for her, forcing them to be cautious about using her maiden name in public documents. There were financial worries when a ship carrying valuable cargo was delayed by storms, and health scares when an influenza epidemic swept through the city. But through it all, they faced each challenge together, their bond growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. They built a life based on mutual respect and shared dreams, a partnership of equals that neither had dared hope for before their paths crossed. A year after their wedding, as they sat on their small porch watching the evening fog roll in over the bay, Sophia placed Zachary's hand over her stomach. "We're going to have a child," she said, her eyes shining with happiness. The joy that spread across his face was all the response she needed. He gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "A family of our own," he whispered against her hair. "Our own little freedom fighter." Sophia laughed, tears of happiness gathering in her eyes. "Let's hope this one doesn't need to be carried to freedom. I think one daring escape is enough for one family." "I don't know," Zachary teased, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Seems to me that breaking locks and daring escapes worked out pretty well for us." "That it did, Mr. Morrison," Sophia agreed, leaning up to kiss him as the fog enveloped their little house in a gentle embrace. "That it did." Their son, William Thomas Morrison, was born on a foggy morning in September 1880. He had his father's gray-blue eyes and his mother's determination. As he grew, he delighted in hearing the story of how his parents had met, though Zachary and Sophia carefully edited the more dangerous parts until he was older. By the time their daughter, Elizabeth Catherine, joined the family 2 years later, Sophia had achieved her dream of becoming a teacher. She taught at a progressive school for girls, where she was known for encouraging her students to think independently and value their own minds. Lessons she had learned through hard experience. Zachary's work with his cousin's shipping company prospered, allowing them to move to a larger home as their family grew. Though never extravagantly wealthy, they lived comfortably, focusing on providing their children with the education, love, and freedom of choice that Sophia had been denied. In 1885, a letter arrived from Ely that would change the course of their lives once again. Sophia's father had died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving her mother alone to manage the family businesses. The letter, written by Catherine, begged Sophia to consider a visit. "Mother has changed," Catherine wrote. "Father's death has softened her. She speaks of you often and longs to meet her grandchildren." The decision was not an easy one. Zachary worried about Sophia returning to the place where she had been imprisoned, feared the old wounds would reopen. Sophia herself was torn between her lingering anger and her desire for reconciliation. "What do you want to do?" Zachary asked her late one night as they discussed the matter. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." Sophia considered carefully before answering. "I want our children to know their grandmother," she said finally. "And I want to return to Ely on my own terms, not as the frightened girl who was locked away, but as the woman I've become." Zachary nodded, understanding as always. "Then we'll go together, all of us." The journey back to Ely was easier than their desperate flight had been years earlier. They traveled by train most of the way, 5-year-old William bouncing with excitement at the adventure while 3-year-old Elizabeth slept contentedly in her mother's arms. As they approached Ely, Sophia felt a strange mixture of emotions: apprehension, nostalgia, and a quiet pride in all she had accomplished since she had last seen these mountains. The town had grown in her absence, the copper mines bringing prosperity and new residents. Yet much remained familiar: the main street where her father's general store still stood, the church steeple rising above the rooftops, and on the hill overlooking it all, her childhood home. Beatrice Ellsworth was waiting on the porch when their carriage arrived. She had aged considerably, her once auburn hair now streaked with gray, her proud posture slightly stooped. When she saw Sophia step down from the carriage, her composure broke and tears streamed down her face. "Sophia," she whispered, reaching out tentatively. "My child." For a moment, Sophia hesitated, the memories of her confinement still raw. Then she looked at her mother, truly looked at her, and saw not the stern jailer of her past, but an aging woman filled with regret. "Mother," she said, stepping forward to embrace Beatrice. The embrace was awkward at first, then softened into genuine emotion. "I was wrong," Beatrice said, her voice breaking. "What we did to you, what I allowed your father to do, it was unforgivable." "Not unforgivable," Sophia corrected gently. "Difficult to forgive, but not impossible." She turned to where Zachary stood with the children. "Mother, this is my husband, Zachary Morrison, and these are your grandchildren, William and Elizabeth." The meeting between Beatrice and Zachary was understandably tense at first. But as Zachary extended his hand and spoke with quiet dignity, Sophia saw something in her mother's expression change, a grudging respect forming as she recognized the quality of the man her daughter had chosen. Their visit lasted 2 weeks, during which a fragile reconciliation began to take shape. Beatrice doted on her grandchildren and made genuine efforts to connect with Zachary. She listened with interest to stories of their life in San Francisco and expressed pride in Sophia's career as a teacher. On their final evening in Ely, as the children slept upstairs in what had once been Sophia's bedroom, Beatrice asked Zachary to join her in the study. Sophia, curious, followed them. "I have a proposition for you both," Beatrice said, her voice steadier than it had been in years. "The businesses your father built, the store, the mining interests, they need someone to manage them. Catherine and her husband have no interest in commerce. I'm offering them to you." Zachary and Sophia exchanged surprised glances. "You want us to move back to Ely?" Sophia asked carefully. "I want to make amends," Beatrice replied. "I want my grandchildren to grow up knowing their family, and yes, selfishly, I want a chance to be the mother to you that I should have been all along." She turned to Zachary. "You have a good head for business. Harold's enterprises would flourish under your management." Zachary was silent for a long moment. "It's a generous offer," he said finally, "but this decision must be Sophia's. I won't bring her back to a place of pain." All eyes turned to Sophia, who found herself overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. Part of her recoiled at the thought of returning to Ely permanently. Yet another part recognized the opportunity for healing, for transforming a place of confinement into one of new beginnings. "I need time to think," she said honestly. "Of course," Beatrice agreed, disappointment evident in her voice but tempered with understanding. "The offer remains open whenever you decide." That night, as they prepared for bed in what had once been a guest room, Sophia had refused to sleep in the attic bedroom of her imprisonment. She and Zachary discussed the proposal. "Could you be happy here?" Zachary asked, his concern for her evident in every word. "After everything that happened?" Sophia moved to the window, looking out at the familiar mountains silhouetted against the night sky. "I never thought I could," she admitted, "but seeing it through your eyes, through our children's eyes, it's different somehow." "How so?" Zachary asked, coming to stand beside her. "When I was locked in that attic, I dreamed of escape, of freedom. You gave me that gift." She turned to face him, taking his hands in hers. "But true freedom isn't just about where you are, it's about choosing your own path, making your own decisions without fear." "And what decision does your heart tell you to make now?" Zachary asked softly. Sophia considered the question carefully. I think we should accept Mother's offer, not because she expects it or because it's convenient, but because it feels right. We could do good here, Zachary. The businesses, the school, we could help shape Ely into something better than it was." Zachary studied her face, searching for any sign of doubt or reluctance. Finding none, he smiled and drew her into his arms. "Then we'll do it," he said. "Together. We'll turn your place of confinement into a place of possibility." "Together," Sophia agreed, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Always together." They returned to San Francisco to settle their affairs, explaining their decision to Thomas and Alina, who were disappointed but supportive. By the following spring, they had moved back to Ely permanently, taking residence not in Sophia's childhood home, which remained Beatrice's, but in a new house they built on a hill overlooking the town, with large windows and many doors, a symbol of the openness and freedom they valued. Over the years that followed, they transformed more than just their own lives. Zachary modernized the Ellsworth businesses, introducing fair labor practices that became a model for other enterprises in the region. Sophia established a school that welcomed girls and boys from all backgrounds, including the children of miners and Native American families from the nearby reservation. Beatrice, freed from Harold's domineering influence, became an advocate for women's suffrage, surprising everyone with her passionate support for a cause she had once dismissed. She and Sophia built a new relationship based on mutual respect rather than authority and obedience. As their children grew, William and Elizabeth heard the full story of their parents meeting how a locked door had been broken, how freedom had been seized rather than granted. They learned that love was not about possession but partnership, not about control but mutual growth. "Your father didn't just rescue me," Sophia would tell them. "He recognized my strength when I had forgotten it myself." And Zachary, still modest after all these years, would add, "Your mother saved herself. I just happened to have the right key at the right time." On their 20th wedding anniversary, as they stood on the porch of their home watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Zachary wrapped his arms around Sophia from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. Sophia turned in his embrace, studying the face she had loved for so many years, the same gray-blue eyes that had looked at her with respect and kindness in that attic room, the same gentle smile that had offered her freedom without conditions. "Not one," she said truthfully. "Every lock broken, every mile traveled, every challenge faced, all of it led us here, to this life we've built together." "To freedom," Zachary murmured, leaning down to kiss her. "To love," Sophia amended as their lips met. "The greatest freedom of all." And as the sun set on Ely, Nevada, casting long shadows across the land that had once been her prison and was now her chosen home, Sophia Ellsworth Morrison knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, not because someone had decided it for her, but because she had chosen it herself, with the man who had taught her that the strongest locks were those we placed on our own hearts, and the truest freedom came from having the courage to break them.